Hello everybody, Chris here, and in this video I want to show all of you how to set up a pause menu inside of Godot 4. So in this video we'll be able to hit the escape key in order to open up our pause menu. Escape can also resume the game, and then there'll be buttons in the menu for resuming the game and exiting the game to the desktop as well. So first off in Godot, when it comes to pausing your game, I want to talk a little bit about your node structure first. So let's just go ahead and start by creating a brand new scene in a project. So I'm going to go to new scene, and let's make the root node other node and just choose node. So with this base node, I'm going to call it game, as in the main node for when the gameplay is running during the game. We want this to just be its own separate thing. So we'll have a level node under this. We can create that by right click, add child node, and let's create this node 2D. And I'm going to rename this to be level. So this level node can be saved as its own separate scene. So I'll right click and let's save a branch as a scene. Let's create a new folder in the project for levels. I'll create this in here, and let's just call this level 1. I'll also rename it to be level 1. Jump into the scene and rename it level 1 as here, just to be kind of clear that this is a specific level. So the reason why we would want the root node of our game and the levels separated is because each node can set up how it's going to handle pausing specifically. So for a level, you may want to pause the entire level. And the way you would do that is first let's jump into the level scene that we saved. Open an editor, and here we can set the defaults for our level. Let's go to process in the inspector, and there'll be a mode here. So process mode allows you to set how a node and nodes under it should basically react to the game being paused. So the default is inherit, which means you just take whatever the parents is and you apply that to the child node. But you can also select another option like pausable or always. So if it's pausable, then that means that it's going to be paused when the game starts to pause. And always is going to mean that it's always running. When paused means that it will only run when the game is actually paused. So the opposite of pausable. So for a level node, we would probably want that to be pausable. So let's select pausable here. I'll hit Control S to save our level scene, and let's go back to our main scene where we're setting up the defaults for our game. I'll also go ahead and save this as its own scene as well. So I'll hit Control S. Let's go up to the root of the project, and we could just call this game.tscn. I think that's fine for now. So with the root node for game, I'm going to select that, go to process, and I'm going to change this to always. So the reason we might want our main game node to always run is that there might be things happening behind the scene in our game that we want to run even when the game is paused. For instance, maybe our main game script needs to handle some data in the background. It might need the process function to be running no matter what state the game is in. So by having your node structure set up like this, we can have nodes that are going to be paused when we pause the game, and then we can have other nodes that won't. So for instance, we could create our pause menu under the game node. So I'm going to right click, add a child node, and let's look for canvas here. So canvas layer for when you want to draw stuff on the screen and you want it to keep its position, you want to parent it to a canvas layer. So let's create our canvas layer here. And now we can right click on that, add a child node. Let's get a control, so a base control node for UI elements, and I'll rename that to be pause menu. So let's right click on this, save branch as scene, go to the root of our project, create a new folder, and I'll call this one UI, and let's save pausemenu.tscn inside of here in case we need it other places in our game as well. So for our pause menu scene, we might want to jump into the editor, take the process and set it to when paused. Now, if it's inheriting always, I don't think that would cause a problem for this tutorial, but this might be the better option just to make sure that the pause menu doesn't do anything unless the game is paused, which would make sense for a pause menu. So taking a look at our game scene, you can see that the pause menu is disabled until the game is paused now. Okay, now let's go back into the pause menu and let's actually set it up. So let's right click on the pause menu, add a child node, and let's look for panel. So the panel can contain a background that you can put everything else on, like buttons and stuff. So I'll create that as the next node, and you can see we get this decent gray background. Now let's right click on panel, add a child node, and let's look for a container. So there's many different types of containers in Godot, but a simple one that will work for our solution here would be a VBox container, organizing things from top to bottom, kind of like a list. So let's use VBox container as our next node. And under VBox container, let's add a menu title. So I'm going to do that by right-clicking, adding a child node, and let's look for a label. Just type that in search. So the label node create here, and we can give some text. So I might say something like equal pause equal. So with the default font, it's going to look kind of blurry when it's that zoomed in. So we might need to zoom out a bit and expand our menu. So let's start by taking the pause menu. And I'm going to make this just the size of the full screen. So to set that up, click on pause menu and let's go to layout and then anchors preset and change this to full rect. This will basically mean that our pause menu will take up the full size of the screen. But that's just a control for what actually gets displayed. So next let's go to panel, go in the inspector, layout mode, change this to anchors, and let's change the anchors preset to center. So now our menu is going to show at the center of the screen, and we can make it bigger now. So let's take one of these corners and just stretch it out kind of like that. Basically, however big you think the menu should be good here. We can always mess with it later. Okay, now I'm just going to take this box and center it around the anchor, roughly right around there. That should be okay for right now. So now let's add a couple buttons to our menu. I'm going to right click on VBox container, add child, and let's get a button. So we just want a standard button here. Let's create that. Okay, we'll see a button pop up here. Let's add some placeholder text here. So we might have a save button, for instance. Let's duplicate the button a few times in our hierarchy. You can select it and hit Control D. So let's do that 3 times. Now I'll rename this second button to be load button. The first one, I'll rename that save button. The third one, let's rename that, let's just say resume button, like resume game. And button 4 will have exit button. And we need to change the text on each of them. So load button, we'll just make the text load. The next button, we'll make that resume. The next button, we'll rename that to be exit. Okay, so if you want these menu items to be centered, let's go to VBox container and make sure that this stretches to the full size of the panel. So with VBox container, let's go to layout, layout position, anchors, and do anchor preset to full rect. Okay, now all of these menu items are going to basically stretch automatically. Okay, so we have a basic menu that we can try to get to show up in our game. So let's go back to the game node, and we'll need to add a script to game in order to pause the game. So let's take our game node and create a new script. So I'll click on inspector, script, new script, and we could just call it game.gd or maybe gamemanager.gd, whatever makes sense for you. We'll just use the default for now. So game.gd, let's remove the boilerplate text. So what we're going to want to do is to have our game node listen to when the game is trying to be paused. So for that, we go to project settings, and we look at our input map, show built-in actions, and then you can see the default key bindings that a player of a Godot game would be able to press for a certain action to be triggered. So we'll use UI cancel to pause and unpause the game. You can also create your own custom actions, and you can assign custom key bindings if you want, but this will work just fine for a standard. So escape key, what's going to trigger UI cancel, so we want to listen for that in our game.gd script. So let's go in here. So because this is a node, it is going to receive input, so we can use function underscore input, which is going to give us an event, and we can use that event, which is actually going to be of type input event. The field typings aren't automatic there, but this is a input event. But when you add in the colon in the type, it'll give you recommendations for what you can do with that parameter. So if we do if event dot, and you'll see all of the functions associated with it pop up now, is action pressed, and we're looking for the action name UI cancel. So here's all the list of default actions that you can use. So UI cancel. Then what we're going to want to do is toggle the game either paused or unpaused. So in order to pause the game, first you want to get the root tree that's running in our Godot game. So get tree, and then you tell the tree to pause the game with the paused property. So get tree dot paused equals, and in this case, we want the opposite of whatever the current value is. So we want to set that to the opposite of whatever it is currently. So let's actually first get that value. So var current value equals, and that's a type boolean, of course, and that's going to be equal to get tree dot paused. So if we know the current value, we can reverse that. So exclamation point for the opposite, or you could do not, which is going to be the same thing, the opposite of whatever its boolean value is. So not current value, and that's what we're going to set paused to. So now let's go to 2D view. Let's hit play. We need to select a default scene to run. So let's select, just select current, and we'll come in here. But we can still see the pause menu. So in order to make the pause menu hide and show, depending on whether the game's paused or not, we'll need to do a little bit more scripting. So in pause menu, let's add a script to the pause menu. So script, new script in the bottom right. Let's create that pause menu script. And when the script is ready, the first thing we're going to want to do is to hide the menu. So you can use hide on a control node, which will hide itself in any children. So let's save that, hit play, and test it. Okay, so now we don't see the pause menu pop up. Before we continue further, let's add in a object to our level scene so that we can see it pause when we hit the escape button. So I'm going to drag this bathtub, which I already set up, into the level. So I'm going to open up the level scene in the editor, and inside of here, I'm going to add this bathtub scene. So just dragging that into there. And then on the level scene as well, let's also add a camera. So add child node, camera 2D, add that in. Hit save, and let's hit play and test and make sure that's there. Okay, so we can see the scene is a little small, so I'm going to need to change my window settings. So project settings, let's go to general, window, and I'll make this, let's say, 1280, 720, but I'll take the scale and I'll set that to 4. So these are settings I kind of often use for these kind of pixel art things. So let's hit close, hit play one more time. Okay, and now when we hit play, we'll see the animation playing. Now, because this bathtub is under the level scene, if I hit escape now, then you're going to see the animation pauses because the bathtub inherits from the level, which is a pausable node. And also, if I hit escape again, then you'll see the game resumes and the animations continue. So escape, pause, escape, unpause. Okay, now we just need, when the game is actually paused, for the pause menu to also open up. So there's different ways we could do that. One would be to use a signal from our main game script. So if I open up the game script, so let's add in here signal toggle game paused, which is going to pass as a parameter to anything responding to the signal. We'll say a Boolean is paused, so of type Boolean. And then whenever we pause the game, we want to emit that signal. So we could just put it down here, and that would probably work okay. But a slightly better way might be to have a Boolean variable with a setter, where whenever we set the paused on the game script, we emit that signal rather than just having it be down here in the input event. So let's create up here another variable. So I will call this variable game paused, which is going to be of type Boolean. And then we'll default this to false. And then we need another colon at the end when we're adding getter and setter functions. So the get is going to return game paused. And the setter, which is going to pass in a value. All setter functions are going to have a value to set that value to the variable. Then we're going to set game paused equal to that value, of course. And then we're going to want to emit the signal. So emit signal is a function all nodes can do, and we are emitting that signal up there at the top. So toggle game paused, and then we need to pass in the parameter. So the parameter is going to be the new game paused value. So now what we can do for our current value is basically we'll just be using whatever our game paused is. So we can get rid of this line. So now what we'll do down here instead is say game paused is equal to the opposite of game paused. And we can even take this, the getTree.paused, and we'll take that up here to right above where we emit the signal, paste that in. So now whenever we set game paused on this script, it's going to set the paused value on the tree, and it's also going to emit this signal. So we don't want current value here, but we actually want game paused. So replace current value with game paused. and all the errors should basically go away here. So now to connect this signal to the pause menu, there's a few different ways you can do it, but just in case we create other scenes that have a different pause menu or a different version of the game script, what we'll do is we'll set the link up in the inspector and then connect to the signal inside of the script. So to do that, let's add in a class name at the top, and I'm going to actually call this game manager to be a little bit more specific. And then to go along with that, let's rename the script, the scene, and the node to be game manager as well. So game manager, let's rename game.gd to be game_manager.gd. And then for the game.tsc, and we can just leave that the same there because I think that still makes sense. This is what we're booting up to actually run our game. So with this class name, we can easily reference a game manager script inside of our pause menu now. So jump into the script for pause menu, and let's add in a @export var here for a game manager. And this is going to be of type game manager. We can do this because we created the class name. Hit Control S. And now if you click on the pause menu, and I'm doing this inside of our game scene, not in the pause menu scene because the game manager only exists in our game scene. So we want to assign the game manager to the pause menu. So in the inspector, click assign, select the game manager node, hit OK. And now our pause menu has a reference to the game manager script. So all we need to do is on ready, after hiding the menu, we can also take the game manager and connect its signal. So game manager dot connect, in quotations, we want toggle game paused. So quotations, and then you can select toggle game paused. And we're going to connect that to our callback function, which is going to be something like no quotations on game manager toggle game paused. And let's also add an underscore to the function name as standard for a signal callback. So we have this function name now. We need to create the function. So I'm going to copy this name. Let's go down here to the bottom function, Control V to paste it in. And then we have the isPaused parameter. So we need to respond to that. And remember, that's of type Boolean. So if the game is paused, we want to show the menu. Otherwise, we want to hide the menu. So if is paused, then we show. Otherwise, if paused is false, so we're going to hide. Okay, so as long as we have in the inspector our game manager assigned, the signal should connect, and then when the game's running, and then when the game manager toggles the game paused, this menu should respond to it. So let's go ahead, run the game, hit play. We see the animation. If we hit escape, the menu pops up. The animation's still going. We'll fix that in a second. If I hit escape again, the menu hides. So at least the menu's opening and hiding properly. So let's check game manager. Where we have get tree.paused. Yeah, so we no longer need the reverse of game paused because when we set the value, we're already changing the paused value. So just get rid of the exclamation point now. And now let's go hit play again. Our animation's playing. When we hit escape, the animation pauses, the menu opens up. If we hit escape, then the menu hides. So now we just need to set up some functions for these buttons. So we could create an individual script for each button, or we can create a signal callback that'll go straight to the pause menu and have the pause menu script manage it. And since these buttons are always going to exist solely on the pause menu, I think that that's a fine way of doing it rather than setting things up in code. So let's select the resume button. And I'm going back to 2D view for this. Let's go to node. And when you have the button selected, you'll see base button signals here. So we can do pressed in order to add a callback function to the pause menu. So on resume button pressed, we do something inside of the pause menu. So connect it to the pause menu. And then now when the resume button gets pressed, we can do something here. Since we're already connected to the game manager, we can easily do something like game manager dot game paused. And we'll set that equal to false because when we resume the game is no longer paused. So that will literally all we need to be able to do for that resume button to work. Okay, so let's hit play and test that resume button out. So we hit escape to pause the game, and I'll hit the resume button to resume the game. And I can hit escape to pause it again and resume to unpause it. Okay, cool. So that's that part done. For the exit button, let's add another signal as well. And this will be to exit the game entirely. So exit button pressed, connect the signal to the pause menu. Okay, so when the exit button is pressed, we want to get the current scene tree. You could kind of think of that as just everything that's running inside of the game right now. And we want to call .quit on the scene tree. So we quit the scene tree, quitting out of everything inside of the game. The application will close. So that's literally all we need to do to exit the game. So let's hit play. Let's hit escape. I'll do resume again just to test that that's still working. Escape again, and let's click exit, and the game exits. Now, although this technically works, you later might actually consider adding in an extra pop-up here saying like, oh, are you really sure you want to exit the game? Unsaved data will be lost or something like that. But just to get the basic menu down, this will be okay for right now. Now we can see that because I scaled up the game, the menu is now really big as well. So we might want to go into the menu and shrink its size down. So let's take the panel, shrink it down. I'll hit W to go to move mode, and let's move it kind of into the center there a little bit. Hit play and test if the menu is still too big. It kind of is. So since our menu is still kind of big, what we can do is to create a theme that will shrink the size of the text. So let's take the label and go to the inspector, theme down here, create a new theme. And I'm going to also click on the drop down and save this in our project. So let's call this gametheme.tres, and I'll save it in the UI folder. So let's save that there. And then we can click on our theme and we can change some settings about it. So our obvious setting would be to change the default font size, which we can do over here. So I'll change default font size. Let's try making it 8. Okay, and then you see that that applies to this label up here at the top. So let's also add the same theme to the other save buttons. So I'm going to select all these save buttons, go down to the theme tab, and let's make sure that those are using the same theme. So let's drag game theme into here. Okay, and now all of the text should be smaller. As you can see with the default font, it doesn't do so well with these low sizes, so you might want to consider something like a pixel art font for this kind of game. So let's hit play and see if that works at all. Escape. Okay, our menu is definitely way smaller now. It has been scaled back up since our window settings scale at ×4, so it doesn't look bad here. So let's just change a couple other settings here. I'll go to this menu and let's scale it. So with this menu, let's use the select mode, Q. Click on the panel, and let's bring the bottom of the panel up. And let's also recenter all of this by hitting W to go to move mode and pull it down here. When we're in select mode, we can see where that center anchor is. So just kind of approximating it for right now. And we can hit play again, hit escape, and our menu pops up there in a more reasonable size. So our save and load buttons, of course, do nothing right now. We haven't added in that function to the game, maybe in a later tutorial. But our resume buttons, the pause function, and the exit game button are working good. So that is the basics of how you can set up a pause menu inside of your Godot game and get pausing to work, where your game level will be paused, but you can keep other things running like your main game script at the same time. So that's going to be it for this tutorial. I've been Chris. If you want to find the scripts for all of this, it'll be down in the description on my Patreon. Thanks for watching to the end, and I will see all of you in my future game development content.